Yesterday, moments after the International Court of Justice ruled in favour of South Africa's application for Israel to ensure measures against genocide in Gaza, Israel's national carrier, El Al Airlines, said it would suspend its route to Johannesburg at the end of March. And as much as the timing of the announcement is questionable, the carrier cites decline in demand as a reason to cancel the busy route. For more conversation on this, we're joined by aviation expert Guy Leitch and Roshan Dadoo, the coordinator at SA Boycott, Divestment and Sanctions Coalition. A very good evening to you both. I'd like to start off with you, Guy. Let's talk about that decision by El Al to terminate the route between Johannesburg and Tel Aviv effective next month. Is it commercial? Is it political?
Yeah, hi, good evening, Hugo. It's both. El Al had only been operating 2 flights a week, and given the entire volatility of the situation in Israel and the Gaza Strip, the amount of demand for that route had fallen off enormously. So, yeah, it was commercial, but I suspect, although obviously I can't prove it, that it was also largely politically motivated, a protest against South Africa's actions in the ICJ. So quite frankly, I think they're opportunistic. They're taking the chance to say, look, this route isn't making us money. We don't like what South Africa's been doing. We're going to close it down and leave you to find another way to Israel if you have to get here.
Now, Roshan, the SA BDS Coalition aims to reinforce boycott and divestment campaigns, arms embargo and so on. How do you believe these actions contribute to your broader goals?
Well, first of all, I think it's about time that the national carrier of an apartheid state stops coming with their direct flights to South Africa, a post-apartheid country. And we are campaigning for a trade embargo because with the BDS movement, as the call was made during our struggle against apartheid, seeks to isolate the apartheid Israeli states. And yesterday, of course, South Africa made history when the ICJ ruled that on the plausibility of our case under the Genocide Convention. So I think I'm sure all of us have been hearing from around the world. I was just in a meeting of a Pan-African Palestine feminist network, and people from Peru, from Argentina to Indonesia, to all different countries across Africa are so welcoming and thankful to South Africa for having been bold enough to take this case to the ICJ and for the case to have ruled that there is plausibility that Israel is committing the crime against humanity of genocide. So I think there are many, many people, millions of people across the world who would really be looking to come to South Africa. And I don't think it's going to make any difference to us in terms of any economic difference for El Al to have cancelled. And let's hope they have taken their Mossad agents out of OR Tambo Airport as well.
Now, Guy, let's look at what typically is considered when an airline pulls out of a particular route. Now, October 7th was when the dreadful happened. It's been, call it 4 months since then. Is 4 months a fair timeline, or would ordinarily you have expected them to wait a few more months for things to normalize, if you will?
Yeah, difficult question, but let's bear in mind too that they're only cancelling flights from the end of March, so it's still another 2 months. Obviously, they need to honour as many of their pre-sold ticket sales as they can. You mentioned the economic impact. Yeah, it's not. I would agree with your co-speaker. Not a huge economic impact to be had. Many of the Jews in South Africa have, quite frankly, already immigrated. The population's down to well under 100,000. Under all counts, typically around 50,000 of the core Jewish people. And there were only 2 flights a week with El Al. So most of the flights were operating on what we call a VFR basis, which stands for visiting friends and relatives, and obviously tourism as well. That's always been a significant component. But tourism had fallen off with the 7th of October quite dramatically. Many Israelis felt that they needed to stay at home and be there to support the conflict in whatever way. We've seen a sharp drop in tourist incoming from Israel. But I think that the important thing is to look at the bigger picture here. The bigger picture is all about air connectivity. And South Africa is a significant trading partner with Israel, probably in the top 30. We have a net balance of trade with Israel. And connectivity is really important to maintain that. If you can get to a place easily, you're going to trade with it easily. So in terms of the bigger picture, El Al's pull out of this route is definitely not a good thing for both South Africa and for Israel. The only real alternative at this stage to get to Israel, if you need to, is to fly Ethiopian. And that obviously requires a stop through Addis Ababa. But there is an alternative. It takes another 3 hours, a bit longer, and it's a bit more expensive. But in terms of actual getting there if you have to, it's still quite feasible to do so after the end of March.
Guy, I want to stay with you for a little bit and talk about the economic impact of El Al pulling out of South Africa, particularly when we talk about those that it employed in South Africa. Was it a huge number of individuals, or were they using shared services to manage the onboarding of passengers and similar services?
Both. The El Al uses shared services in terms of the ground service providers at OR Tambo. Most companies do, in fact. And there's only a choice of two, really, Menzies or the other one I've forgotten off the top of my head, and Bidvest. But at the same time, El Al had its own very onerous security regimes. Your other speaker talked about Mossad agents, and that's true. There are indeed security agents vetting everybody who boards an El Al flight, and indeed every time the flight took off, there was a ground vehicle accompanying the flight all the way to the holding point on the runway before it began its takeoff run. So there was a vast additional security component around all these flights. That will presumably end with the ending of the flights. And of course, we don't know when they're going to restart. We don't know how long the war will continue, and whether El Al will in fact ever restart the flights, given the continuing immigration of Jews from South Africa.
Now, Roshan, the SA BDS Coalition has demanded that the South African government cut all ties with Israel. What specific measures do you think government should take, and how do you envision these actions influencing the international community's stance on the conflict?
I think the international community is looking to South Africa now more than ever to demonstrate solidarity with the Palestinian people. And of course, we're calling for a complete trade embargo. This was one of the demands that we made on the international community during our struggle against apartheid here, because we need to isolate a pariah state, a genocidal state. The judgment yesterday, in effect, was saying that a ceasefire has to happen because you can't get aid and water and so on into the people in Gaza at the current moment. But we know that the genocidal Israeli war cabinet has been ratcheting up the attacks and the atrocities, and now it's the 113th day of genocide, and they are claiming that they will continue. The Heritage Minister even said, I know I've already been taken to the ICJ for calling for nuking Gaza, but I'm going to say it again. And that was the day before yesterday, the day before the judgment was made. So we have to keep up the pressure. We have to isolate apartheid Israel. We need full sanctions, as there was against apartheid South Africa, which supported our struggle, and it helped us enormously in terms of getting rid of apartheid here. And we have to be arguing now for complete sanctions, a complete arms embargo, and for us in South Africa, a trade embargo. Our three biggest exports to Israel are diamonds, coal, and then grapes. And we heard the other day that the Israeli grape importers are no longer importing South African grapes. Great, let's look for other markets. We do have policy around looking for markets in the global south. Again, with coal, I think there must be other markets that are available to us. And for diamonds, well, we export diamonds and then we re-import them from Israel in a more polished form. But we do have legislation around beneficiation of our mineral resources. And so that would be job creating, and that would be giving people, South Africans, skills. So I think it's an argument to say, let's break ties with a genocidal state. We can't be having relations as normal. Let's disrupt business as usual. Let's also campaign for a sports, cultural and academic boycott, because the Olympics is coming up. Do we want to be playing sports, sending a team and playing sport with a genocidal Israeli participation? I think we have to call on our sporting bodies, on SASCOC in this case, and also to get apartheid Israel kicked out of FIFA. We just simply cannot allow business to carry on as normal in any sphere of life. And I think that the court decision yesterday demonstrated that South Africa and South African people and our government is willing to keep the pressure on, until Israel stops this horrific genocidal mission in Gaza, but also so that there's a possibility to end the 75 years of settler colonialism and apartheid that the Palestinian people have been suffering under.
Guy, very quickly, we've obviously talked about the drop in business as a result of the war that's going on in Israel. So can we expect other countries to Al to quit other countries, if you will? Because obviously it's not just about Johannesburg. The implications that are being applied to the South Africa situation can be applied across the world.
Yeah, well, look, obviously I'm not in a position to comment on the policy directives or what's going on behind closed doors at El Al. But my view is not. El Al is an airline like any other airline. Yes, it's state-owned, but it needs to turn a profit. It can't just, in political protest, turn away from markets. It could do that because South Africa is really irrelevant. We are an absolute lightweight when it comes to Israel. We think that we box above our weight, and quite frankly, this ICJ was mostly just a political stunt because it doesn't have any significant economic impact. As I've pointed out, there are alternative means to get to Israel. We can use Ethiopian for really very little extra cost or time. So I think that the primary motive behind this particular stopping in flights was political. And I think I need to point out too that IATA, the International Air Travel Association, has shown conclusively that every dollar spent on an airline ticket creates additional $30 worth of GDP revenue in the receiving country. It's a pity that we're losing that. I think that we're going backwards in terms of economic development for the sake of making a political point. I don't comment one way or another on the rightness of the political point, but I will quite clearly make the point that cutting air connectivity, cutting flights, cutting the number of services is counter-development of South Africa. Just look at the Cape, look at the success of the Cape's Air Access Initiative and how it's absolutely managed to create a boom in not just tourism but the broader Cape economy. To lose this flight to Johannesburg, small though it is still a significant step backwards.
That was aviation expert Guy Leitch and Roshan Dadoo, the coordinator at SA Boycott's Divestment and Sanctions Coalition.